What's up, family? Welcome back to week 3 of the Summer Enrichment program. We are so excited to have you once again. Thank you for coming back to learn with us. We have another great week prepared for you. It is Mrs. Jones, and over here we have
Carson.
Hey, Miss Carson. So we're back again for some more K2 fun. So if you are in grades kindergarten all the way through 2nd grade, tonight is your night. So before we get started, I just want to really quickly give some more shout outs. I know we mentioned last week. So if you want to be shout out, you want to hear your name being called out, all you have to do is just tune in, watch us, and make sure you drop some comments down below, and that will show us that you're participating with us and you're engaged with us, as well as don't forget about those reading logs if you're reading and sending in your assignments to our email account, which is ccogsummerinrichment@gmail.com. So that's another way that you can participate. So if you do those things, then you will be shouted out. So for our shout outs tonight, we have Mr. Mouse, MJ, Saint, and Riley. And I think Miss Carson has some more friends she wants to shout out.
We have Christian, we have Avery, DJ, and Jalen, and their little sister, Kennedy.
Awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in with us and just being engaged. And we know that there might be some new faces, some new friends that we come across for this week. So we're excited. So we're just going to jump right in it. So for this week's lesson, we are going to be talking about asking and answering questions. So just to do a little recap, our first week, we talked about retelling a story, which is just basically retelling what happened in the story. Then last week, we talked about the characters and the different story elements, like your characters and your setting. And we talked about the character's response. So that's what the character says or what the character does based off of a certain event that happened in the story. So this week, we want to talk about asking and answering questions. So we ask questions to help us understand the text, and it helps us to identify key details in the story. And also, we don't just ask questions, but we also answer them. So when we answer our questions, we use the text. Say it with me. You guys know I say it all the time. Good readers always look back in the text.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. So good readers always look back in the text. So we want to focus on asking and answering questions. And there's this really cool strategy that I like to share with my students that helps us to ask and answer questions as we're reading our story. And that strategy is the Fab 4 strategy. So there's 4 different strategies that we like to do whenever we are reading our story so they can help us to ask and answer questions. And I'm going to need Ms. Carson's help in just a second. But we're going to talk about the first 2 strategies before we read our story. And the reason why we're going to talk about it before we read our story is because we ask questions before we do our reading, we ask questions during our reading, and then we ask and answer some questions after we read our story. So before we read our story, we want to talk about the first 2 strategies of the Fab 4 strategy. And those 2 strategies are predicting and questioning. So the very first strategy is predicting. So when we predict in a story, I have anybody know what this is? I have a magnifying glass here. So whenever we're predicting in a story, we want to be like detectives, okay? So we're going to try to use clues based off of things that we already know, which is what we call background knowledge. So we can use clues from things that we already know. We can use clues from the story. And so before we're reading, we might want to predict what we think is going to happen in the story. And a good way to do that is to look at the cover of the book. So Ms. Carson, you think you can show us? Oh, there we go. So we have Parker Looks Up. That looks like a pretty good story, and I can bet you it is. But we haven't read it yet, so we don't know exactly what's happening in the story. So just by looking at that cover, can we get that cover one more time, Ms. Carson? We see there's a girl, and we can probably predict that her name is Parker. So we have Parker here, and it looks like she's looking at something. So maybe we can predict that Parker's going to be looking at something. So it's pretty simple as that. So basically, we can use our background knowledge, what we already know, to try to figure out what's going to happen next in the story. So we can use sentences like, I think this is going to happen, or I bet that's going to happen. We can use those sentences to help us to predict. And then after we finish predicting, then we can go to questioning. So we predicted, next let's question. And I have here my handy dandy microphone. Thank you, Morgan. Again, this is Morgan's microphone. I know, right? So I have Morgan's microphone here, and Miss Jones, why do you have a microphone? Are you going to sing a song? No, I'm not going to sing a song. This microphone is for questioning. So when we think about questioning, we want to pretend like we're talk show hosts. So let's think about some talk show hosts. A famous one is Miss Oprah. So when Oprah is on her talk show, she asks people questions. She interviews them, and she asks them questions about their life and things that they have going on. So we're going to be talk show hosts. And when we get to the questioning part, we want to ask those questions, okay? And when we think about asking questions, we have question words that we like to use, which is who, what, when, where, why, and then we have a bonus one, how. So we could ask questions like, if we were interviewing characters from this story, we could say, why does Parker look up? Or what is Parker looking at? These are questions that we can ask even before we read the story. So now that we have talked about all of these things before we read, and I guess I can put my microphone down now. After we have talked about these things before we read, then we can get ready to read the story so we can figure out what happens. So now I'm going to throw it over to Miss Carson here, and she is going to take us away with our story.
So today we're reading the story, Parker Looks Up, An Extraordinary Moment. And this story was written by Miss Parker Curry, who at the time of this story was 4 years old. She co-wrote this story with her mother, Jessica. Parker Looks Up, An Extraordinary Moment. Parker Curry loved to dance. Dressed in her favorite tutu, she imagined she was a dancing queen. But one rainy Tuesday, instead of going to dance class, Parker's mom said, "Let's go to the museum." Ava, too. Parker loved visiting the museum almost as much as she loved twirling and leaping in the air. She pulled on her boots. Mom and Sister Ava buttoned up their jackets. And off they went. Have fun, girls. Bye, Dad. Splashing and smiling. And surprise! Gia, Parker's best friend, greeted them from the top of the museum steps. Yay! It's Gia! Once inside, the friends hurried down a long hall, looking at the paintings all around them. They saw prancing horses, blooming flowers, a bushy mustache, a shiny jeweled necklace, two peacocks with red eyes, and a basket of slimy fish. Ew! And feathers. Lots and lots of brilliant feathers. Hurry up, Ava! When Gia spotted a playroom, she raced ahead. Parker charged after her. Explore. Let's make silly faces. After Gia stuck purple hair onto the easel, and Parker added a pirate hat and sunglasses. It was time to go home. Time to go, girls. Skipping down the hall, the girls spied a row of frilly white tutus. Parker raised her arms. Gia spun around and around and around. "Wait for me, Parker," called, dancing after her friend. Until, what do you think she saw? She froze in her tracks, spellbound. Parker Curry looked up. A portrait of First Lady Michelle Obama loomed before her. She had rich brown skin, just like Parker, and kind, familiar eyes that reminded Parker of her mother, her grandmother, her sister, and yes, even of herself. How could someone look so real and so magical all at the same time? Who is she? Parker's mother's voice filled the air, her words coming to rest squarely on Parker's tiny shoulders. Mother, lawyer, writer, caring, hero, friend, sister, courageous, smart, inspirational, confident, dynamic, advocate, honest, volunteer, mentor, hopeful. Those were all words that describe Mrs. Obama. "She is a queen," Parker whispered, unable to look away, to move, to breathe. In that moment, Parker saw more than just a portrait. She saw a road before her with endless possibilities. Now she's imagining everything that she can be because she saw this portrait. Suddenly, Parker felt a small hand in hers, and the spell was broken. "Come look, Ava," she said, putting her arm around her little sister and standing tall. For Parker Curry was feeling powerful and strong, and even though she hadn't moved, inside, she was dancing. And that is the end of our story. Parker looks up. And this is a true story. So when we are talking about asking and answering questions in a text, like Ms. Jones said, we want to think about those 6 question words. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. The first one we're going to look at is the word who. When we're talking about who, we're talking about who was the story about, who was in the story. So who was in the story? We had Parker, her mother, her little sister Ava. Dad was in there for a little bit. And we saw Gia and Gia's mother. So those are the who of our story. The next word we have is what. What are they doing? In this story, Parker, her mother, her little sister Ava, her friend Gia, and Gia's mom, they're enjoying an afternoon together. When is our next word. And if you look on my card, it's got a watch, because when talks about time. That's another way for setting, another word for setting. The when and the where. So when we're talking about when, if we look back on this page in the story, the second page, We know it's a rainy Tuesday. And we can probably guess it's in the afternoon because she was going to go to dance class. And most likely she would go to dance class in the afternoon. So we've got who, what, when. Our next question word is where. Where did they go? In the story, if we look at our pictures, it never says exactly where they go. It said they went to a museum. But if you look very closely in the picture, it says they went to the Donald Reynolds Center for American Art and Portraiture. So they went to a very famous museum in Washington, D.C. So we've got who, what, when, where, why. Why does Parker Curry look up? Or why does she stare at the painting? The reason she stared at the painting is because she sees a picture of our 44th First Lady, Mrs. Michelle Obama. And when she looked at the picture, she could see all of the women in her family, herself, her mother, her grandmother, and her little sister. Last but not least, we have how. How do we know that Parker Curry literally and figuratively looked up to Michelle Obama? We know she literally looked up to her because she stood staring at the picture. We know figuratively that she looked up at her because she stood frozen, spellbound in front of her picture, imagining all the things that she could be because Michelle Obama was the 44th First Lady of our nation. I'm going to kick it back over to Mrs. Jones.
Awesome, Miss Carson. I love this story. Love, love, love this story. Doesn't Miss Carson pick the best stories? Yes. So again, that was another great story. So we talked about our first two strategies of the Fab4 strategies. So now we want to move and we want to talk about the last two strategies of the Fab4 strategies. So one thing that I love that Miss Carson did is Miss Carson, she looked back in the text to answer her questions. So Miss Carson had some really, really, really good questions that she answered, that she asked and she answered using those 6 question words, and she looked back in the text to find her answers. So great job, Miss Carson. And that's what we want you guys to do whenever you read your stories. So we talked about the Fab4 strategies. We talked about the first 2, which is to predict. That means to guess what we think will happen next using our clues. So we have our magnifying glass here. And then we talked about questioning. So that's where we would question. We are going to be talk show hosts, and we're going to ask some good questions. And we're going to do that while we are reading. So before we read, we want to predict. And then while we're reading during the story, we can stop and we can think about some questions that maybe we would like to ask. So the third strategy that we want to think about is clarifying. So what does that word mean? That's a really big word, Mrs. Jones. Clarifying, or to clarify, means to make things clear. Okay, so to help us remember, you think about see, clarify, make things clear. Okay, so clarifying means to make things clear. So what's something that we use that makes things clear? What about glasses? Yes, so Mrs. Jones, she wears glasses. Right now I have my contacts in, but if I didn't have my contacts in and I didn't have my glasses on, everything would be fuzzy. I wouldn't be able to see anything. So I need my glasses or my contacts, but in this case, my glasses, I'm going to put them on so I can make things clear. So the third strategy that we want to use in our Fab4 strategy is that we want to clarify. We want to make things clear. So this is where we answer some questions. So before we read the story, we had a few questions that we asked, like, well, why is Parker looking up? Or what is Parker looking at? And so to clarify or to make things clear, to help us understand, we're going to go back. Yep, we're going to look back in the text and we're going to try rereading the text to help us answer those questions. Clarifying also works for maybe there's a word that we don't understand, or maybe there's a word that we don't know how to pronounce. We can also look back and clarify, make things clear, and we can try rereading the text to see if we can figure it out. So that third strategy within our Fab4 strategy is clarifying. And then the last strategy we have is to summarize. And summarize is another word for retelling. So yes, we have already learned what it means to retell. So what are we going to use for summarizing? We're going to use our 5-finger retelling hand. So when we summarize, that basically means just to retell the story in your own words, and you're going to use your 5-finger retelling hand, or you're going to use the strategy SWBST. So that's the somebody wanted, but so then. So you would use those strategies to help you to summarize. So we have those 4 things that we like to do whenever we're reading a story. We're predicting, we're guessing what's going to happen next. We're going to question. That's where we're going to use our question words. And we're going to ask questions before and during our reading. Then we're going to clarify, we're going to make things clear, we're going to go back in the text, and we're going to try to answer some of those questions that we had, or try to maybe reread some things that we didn't understand in the story. Then we're going to summarize, and that's where we're going to retell the story in our own words using our 5-finger retelling hand, or SWBST. So we have all of those 4 different strategies. And so you're probably thinking, Mrs. Jones, how in the world am I going to remember all of that? So there's this song that I like to teach my students to help remember the Fab4 strategies. Okay, so this is the Fab4 song. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Okay, so we have our 4 strategies again, which is to predict. We're going to question, clarify, and summarize. So to help us remember that, we're going to put this in a song, okay? And here we go. Here's the song. So the song is Fab4, Fab4, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when you read a book? Fab4, Fab4, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when you read a book? And we're going to summarize, clarify, question, and predict. That's what I do when I read a book. I'm going to, again, summarize, clarify, question, and predict. That's what I do when I read a book. So you're going to be thinking about that song, and you can sing that song to help you remember those 4 different things that you're going to do whenever you're reading a story, okay? So now that we have learned what to do whenever we're reading our stories, we learn to ask and answer questions. Now you know what time it is. It's drum roll. It's Bible time. So it's time for us to go and look in the Bible, and we're going to read a story in the Bible to help us. Again, we fed our minds. Like Ms. Jones always says, now it's time to feed our spirits, and we're going to read a Bible story. Okay, so, and I'm excited about this Bible story. The Bible story that we're going to read on today is called The Brave Queen. So if we make a connection here, I think I remember Parker saying that Mrs. Obama, which is the 44th First Lady of the United States, she called her a queen. She looked up to her and she thought of her as a queen. So we're going to read this story called The Brave Queen and learn about another queen within the Bible. Okay, here we go. Make sure you guys can see here. So this is called The Brave Queen. So here we go. King Xerxes of Persia was looking for a new queen. From all the beautiful young girls of the land, he chose lovely Esther. Esther did not tell him she was a Jew. The king's advisor, Haman, hated Jews, especially Esther's cousin, Mordecai. Haman tricked the king into signing a decree that ordered the killing of all Jews. Esther's cousin told her that she had to try to get the king to change his mind. Esther was frightened, which is another word for scared. So Esther was frightened. To go before the king without a summons was punishable by death. Only if the king held out his scepter would that person be spared. But Mordecai sent another message saying, maybe God made you queen precisely so that you can save his people. Esther was scared, but made up in her mind to go to the king. When he saw her, he smiled and held out his golden scepter, asking her what she wanted. Esther could not bring herself to ask the king there and then. Instead, she invited him and Haman to a banquet in her room. When the king came to dinner, he offered her anything she wanted, up to half his kingdom. Esther bravely told him that she was a Jew, and she asked him to save her people. When the king found out how Haman had tricked him, he sent him to the gallows. He couldn't change the decree, but he made another one saying that the Jews would be allowed to defend themselves. When the Jews were attacked, they were able to fight back and they overcame their enemies. They were saved. And every year, the Jewish people celebrate the bravery of beautiful Queen Esther. Wow. So what an amazing Bible story we just read, okay? So last week we talked about central message, and we talked about how the central message is what we can learn from the story. So what can we learn from this story? So this story is about Queen Esther and how she was a Jew. And there was this decree, which basically was like, that means a rule. There was this rule that said that the king had to kill all the Jews. And she wanted to save her and all of her people, her family and her friends. And so in order for her to do that, she had to be really brave, even though she was afraid. She had to be brave, and she had to go to the king, and she had to ask the king for his help. And she was brave, and that's what happened. The king ended up helping her, and her people were able to defend themselves, and they were saved. Okay, so thinking about this brave queen, what can we learn from this brave queen? We can learn that always be brave and stand up for what you believe in. Or maybe when it's time to go back to school, maybe you see some other people not being very kind to one of your friends, or maybe they're not one of your friends. There's somebody that you don't know. But anytime you see someone doing something that's not right, you should always stand up for it, and always make sure that you stand up for what's right. So we can learn from Queen Esther that we can be brave even though we're afraid. It's always good to stand up for what's right so we can save and help others. And when you stand up for what's right, you can inspire others to do the same. So always remember that. And I want you to think about this story whenever you come and you face any challenges that you may face in life, whether at home or whether it's at school or wherever you may be. Now, what I want us to do is I want us to close out in a word of prayer. So if we could just bow our heads and pray. Dear God, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for just this lesson that we have learned. God, we thank you for helping us to learn and grow. We thank you for this new skill that we learned. We thank you that we're going to apply it. We thank you that we were able to read your word and learn about Queen Esther and learn about how she was brave and she stood up for what she believed in, and how we too can do the same thing. We pray all of these things in your name, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Awesome.
Amen.
All right, Mrs. Swanson, what do you think about that? That was awesome, wasn't it?
That was an amazing
Yes, amazing story that we read about Parker. Amazing Bible story. I think it just gets better every single week. So we are really, really excited. We have one more week after this, okay? So I really want you guys to just dig in and just really, really, really work even harder. Try your best. I know it's summertime. We want you to have fun. Please have fun, but always leave just a little bit of room to learn and grow as well. And so with that being said, don't forget about your reading logs. Don't forget about your assignments. If you want to, you can go to our resources, which is going to be in the link posted below. Go to those resources, and there's lots of cool videos and different activities that you can do just to help you practice on the skill that we learned. You can turn in those assignments to our email again. That's CCOG Summer Enrichment at gmail.com. You can turn that into us, and we will look over that, and we'll be ready to shout you out next week, as well as we hope that you all have been commenting down below and chatting with us, and that can also get you a shout out. So we're going to let you guys go because we know we have middle school up next. So we will see you guys, not middle school, yes, upper elementary. We have upper elementary up next. Can't forget about my 3 through 5. So 3rd grade to 5th grade, you're up next. Middle school, we'll see you on Wednesday. All right, see you guys. Love you. Bye-bye.